This is my loop layout. My idea was that the coolant will come in from the top, then it will flow from the bottom to the GPU, then up through the radiator, back into the reservoir. Ideally, the radiator outlet would connect to the bottom of the reservoir, but then water would be going in both ends, and I wasn't sure if that would then trap air in the radiator. This way it made sense in my head. The water would flow in clockwise through the system and come out of the radiator when it was full, then fill up the reservoir. Here I have a Y splitter and a valve for the vacuum and one for the coolant. The vacuum has a catch can and the bucket of coolant is up on a shelf. The first thing I did was submerge the hose with the valve open to fill the hose with coolant. I then closed the valve and raised the valve side out of the bucket. I clamped the hose to the bucket so that the open end doesn't raise out of the coolant. Now the hose is totally filled with coolant with no air bubbles. The bucket with coolant is up higher than my system, so gravity can help fill the system. I have a drain valve at the top of my reservoir, so I make sure that it's open. I put a valve at the top because I was worried when I disconnected the fill hose, all my coolant would flow out due to the radiator being above the reservoir. Here I open the valve to the vacuum pump. Now I can start vacuuming the air out of my system. I went to 5 psi, but be careful not to damage your radiator. The first time I vacuumed the air, the radiator made some scary sounds. You can also leave the vacuum like this for a few minutes to check if there's any leaks. Now I will close the valve to my vacuum and slowly open the one for the coolant. I had already flushed my system with a loop cleaner solution, then distilled water. You can see the coolant start to rise towards the radiator. I close the coolant side valve before any air can get into the line. I also release the pressure from my vacuum pump before opening the valve. Now I just repeat the process. Close the vacuum side. Slowly open the coolant line. I also strapped my catch can up so coolant wouldn't go into my pump. Bubbles continue to come out of my radiator right here. I should have pointed the vacuum nozzle up on the Y splitter to get less coolant in the catch can. When the catch can would fill up with coolant, I would just close the valve and pour the can into the bucket. Now the coolant has filled up the reservoir, but there is still air in the radiator. Here I jumped the gun and plugged in the pump to start running. There was still a ton of air in the radiator I might have been able to vacuum out still. Running the pump like this made a bunch of micro bubbles. At least the filled tube was submerged, so it didn't splash as much. Here I left the pump running while I vacuumed and filled some more. I'm not sure if vacuuming while the pump is running stresses out the pump. Now I have almost all the air out of the loop. Vacuuming some more, I still saw a few bubbles come out of the radiator. At this point I was pretty happy, so I let it run with just a pump for a while. Here is the system running with fans and all. Here you can see the system still had a bunch of microbubbles I was trying to avoid. I let the system run with just a pump when I went to work. By the third day, all the little bubbles were gone except a bit of air at the very top. If I were to do it again, I would probably try separating the vacuum and the fill line. That way I could vacuum out some air, then open the fill line. As the coolant would flow in, I could just continue to vacuum. My only concern is the sound my radiator made when I first vacuumed out the air. I have no idea what the radiator is rated for on vacuum, but it's probably not designed for that, so I hope I didn't damage it. Overall, it was pretty fun exercise to learn and try to figure this out.